Hi everyone, potentially a hard hitting video to some extent, but I really would like you to bear with it. It's been born out of three friends of mine in recent weeks have talked about suicide. Two have said that they have been close to taking their own life, and one has actually tried to, thankfully unsuccessfully. And you may know from a previous video and posts that I've done in the past that I guess I am a byproduct of a successful suicide, if you could call it that. My own father took his own life when I was young, and obviously that has had huge consequences in my life ever since, and I think it is very valid to talk a little bit about those now, because it struck a chord with me, one particular thing that one of my friends said was, and the thing that they said was that their family would get over it if they died. And I said to them that they don't. In my opinion, you don't get over the death of somebody who you love, who was extremely close to you, by suicide. I'm not too sure how you get over death anyhow, to a large extent, but there has been quite a few people that I've lost in my life, who, I've loved very much: grandparents, friends, colleagues, and they're all absolutely dreadful. But I guess for me, the worst one was my own father, for two reasons. One, it's my dad. Three reasons. One, it was my dad. Two, I was very young. But three, and the most poignant one, I believe, and the reason why it's been such a struggle, is that he took his own life. And the thing with suicide is that the people that are left behind never really have any answers. Even if there are notes left, sometimes, it's not War and Peace that is left. So there are a lot more questions that remain unanswered after the event, and actually that can turn the people that are left absolutely batshit crazy, if I'm honest. And there have been periods throughout my life where that has happened. So I'm going to take you back. So I turned 9 in the July, and in the September my father took his own life. I didn't really learn the full extent or the details surrounding his death. I kind of knew it was suicide. It was put to me that, he had pains and they were awful, and he had health issues, and he just wanted it to be over. So that's how it was kind of sold to me, if you like, his non-accidental death. And then as a teenager, I knew that something wasn't right about that. And as an early teenager, age 14, on the anniversary of his death, we were going to the crematorium where my mother had like a plaque kind of put up in his memory. And I remember walking towards the crem as we got off the bus, and I said to her, I know that there's more about my father's death. Will you tell me what that is? And she did. And it was a suicide pact with his mistress that nobody knew anything about. Certainly not my mother, but apparently they'd been having an affair for a few years, about 4 years, as the inquest had found out. So what this meant was that there was a lot of lying and deceit, double lives really, and it then made me question a lot of the life that we had with my father when he was alive. So now, as a 43-year-old, actually my memories are very, very limited. Sometimes I think I remember something, but actually I don't. It's just a photograph that I've come across that I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't actually my memory, it wasn't in my brain, that's just this photograph that I can kind of remember seeing. But the main problem with my dad's suicide is that it's left me with a feeling that I didn't quite realise what it was until I was in my 20s. I went through various different phases. So one, I could have gone absolutely mental and gone off the rails and turned to drink and drugs and just been an absolute arsehole, but thankfully that didn't happen. I probably had a very good grounding with my mother. So it made me more determined, if anything else, to be a half decent person. But once I found out the true extent of his death, I did struggle. I struggled with school in particular. I struggled with the school that I was in. It was all girls. It was shit. I hated it. We had a load of nuns. It was just crap. I felt like my life at primary school was very, very different to how it was in secondary school, and I didn't really deal very well with that transition. Coupled with the fact that, you know, I was the only person that I knew that only had one parent. Back in the 80s, it just wasn't really a thing. I didn't know one other person, one other child that had lost a parent to death, never mind suicide. And not to proportion any blame onto my family here, however, nobody talked about it either. About my dad, about his death, about suicide. Nobody really said anything, nobody really mentioned him, and rightly so, you know, especially looking back now and as a mother myself, and as an adult, you know, a lot of the focus and attention was on my mother, because if I think about it, my God, the amount of pain that she must have been under when she found out that my dad had died and the circumstances of which surrounded it. I don't even know how she coped with that. And I remember hearing several times, I remember being in earshot of people saying, oh, you know, Kelly will be fine. She's really tough. Kids are resilient. Kids bounce back. You know, she'll be fine. And yes, she is fine. But I think it would have helped me greatly had people had recognised it and talked about it, and really, really given me the opportunity to talk about my feelings as well, because that never ever happened ever. So consequently, I suppose a lot of feelings were kind of shoved in and bottled up, and I just kind of was a bit of a striver and always have been. So anyway, the event that kind of made me realise what this shit was all about, and how I'd been struggling probably inwardly for quite a few years, was I had a very good career in banking very early on, and then I left banking because I met somebody who was in the hospitality industry, a boyfriend, and I'd always wanted my own restaurant, and it gave me the impetus to think, right, you know, let's just do this. Sold a load of shares that I had in ShareSave with the bank that I worked for, bought a pub, sold it, bought another pub, sold that, and then bought what we called the Jewel and the Crown, which was a gastro pub in deepest, darkest Northumberland, and it was fabulous and I loved it. And it meant that I could come home as well, because at the time I'd been in Glasgow for about 3.5 years. And anyhow, I thought everything was kind of okay, and everything was good. But there was a few cracks in the relationship, and I wasn't entirely sure what was happening, and I was working really, really hard in the pub, and this chap that I was with was flying back and forwards to Scotland, which is where he was from, and I actually still had a pub there as well. And I'd employed a manager there, a lady, and I was going back and forth as well, but he was kind of overseeing it. But in essence, it was my pub, it was my name above the door, and it was my name on the license as well. So I worked very, very closely with this woman. And anyway, I had a feeling that something wasn't right with the chap that I was with. I thought he was struggling probably with alcohol. Turns out he was an alcoholic. and I had a feeling that he might have been cheating. So anyhow, long story short, we were both in the pub one night. We'd actually stayed overnight, which wasn't a regular thing, but we were in the pub overnight in Northumberland. And in the morning, I woke up to a text from the manager that I had up in Glasgow telling me that it was her that was sleeping with the man that I was with. And the first words that came out of my mouth were, "I am never good enough." And that was the first time that I verbalised ever feeling that way. And where that stems from is the suicide of my dad. Because as much as people say, and you even say yourself, it wasn't my fault, what could I have done? I was only 9. I still felt, although I hadn't verbalised it, that I wasn't good enough in order to keep him alive. He still made a decision that his life was better ended than it was to stay alive and be a father to me, and a husband, whether estranged or not, to his wife, and a son and a brother. He had lots of family that loved him and lots of friends and work colleagues. He had a fantastic job. But the whole point of this is that it took me 20 years really to actually say the words that I'd subconsciously been thinking. I'm a very self-aware person, and I've worked on myself a lot over the years. I teach yoga and meditation now, but they've been part of my life for eons. So I felt like I'd always done a lot of work on myself. But for some reason, I had never ever admitted to myself that that's how I felt. And I've struggled with it since. So since saying the words, it's kind of come back to bite me on the arse quite a few times. And also what it does is it prevents me from asking for help as well, sometimes when I need it. And it has prevented me from letting people in. It has affected my ability to trust people. And ultimately, going back to what a friend of mine said, that people will get over a death by suicide, they will not. And what it does is it leaves the people that are left behind with huge insecurities and issues, and problems that will plague them for the rest of their days. And for me, it's always the feelings of inadequacy and not being enough for somebody. So whether that be not being enough for my father, not being enough for the man that I was with in order to stop him from having an affair, and various other different things throughout the years. I guess that's been the gift that suicide has given me, and one that I wish that it hadn't, and I wish that I didn't have, because it can be quite debilitating at times. And ultimately what it's done is, because I've fought against it ever since, I'm always striving, and I always feel like I have to prove, not to anybody but myself, that I am good enough. So it wasn't enough for me to have 1 degree, I wanted another. And then it wasn't enough for me to have 2, I wanted another. And then I quite fancied a master's. And then I wanted this career, and then I wanted that career. And then I thought, oh, well, what if I do this, and what if I do that? And yes, I can have 2 dogs, and I can be pregnant all at the same time. And there's just always something. I never, ever give myself a break, and it's actually exhausting. And I've worked on it quite a bit through therapy as well. Over the last 2 years, I've been having psychotherapeutic, in fact I'm not too sure, I think she's a psychologist actually, but I've been having therapy at Maggie's Cancer Centre, for almost 2 years now, on and off. Sometimes I'm there every week, and sometimes I don't see Mary Jane, who's my therapist, for quite a few months. But throughout that period of time that I've been seeing her, we have at times talked about my feelings of inadequacy, and the feeling that I never feel that I'm good enough, and the feeling that I've, for a long time now, had to be the parent to my mother. Well, since I was 9, really. She did a fabulous job. I'm not taking anything away from her, but I've been the second parent, if you like, for quite some time. So I've parented myself, and I feel like I've parented my mother as well an awful lot of the time, because she was just broken, and I had to try and fix her with me just, I don't know, kind of being okay or pretending to be okay. But that thing of pretending that you're okay, that in itself actually is really exhausting as well. And I've blogged about this in the past as well. I've wrote a blog called The Great Pretender, which was where I was studying and struggling with cancer surgeries and treatments, flares up of Crohn's disease, breaking down of marriages, losing homes, losing businesses. There's been quite a lot that I've had to deal with, that probably have added, I should say, to the feeling of not being good enough. So I'm not going to blame my father for everything, because I'm okay, you know. I'm not a bad person. Yeah, I'm a bit fucked up, but I think probably most people are. But the whole point of this post is, please don't think that suicide is the best option for anybody. You, the people around you, the people who love you. It is not. Life will not be better for them without you in it. Life will absolutely 100% be worse. There is nothing to be made better by you not being here. Please don't leave anybody the way that I've been left. Please don't leave anybody thinking that they are never good enough in order to keep you alive. Just don't do it. Please don't do it. There are always very good reasons to be on this earth. I have fought with horrific surgeries and shitty cancer diagnoses to stay alive. Please don't waste your life by deciding to take it away of your own accord. And please don't leave any victims left behind, because I guess that's how it feels, a victim of suicide, really. Anyhow, I know this isn't probably the typical New Year post, and I know it's a massively long one, and I'm going to leave it on a positive note, as I always do. So I've talked about all the shit stuff about suicide, and actually there are no upshots of it at all, other than, like I said before, I could have turned into an absolute arsehole and ruined my life and all sorts of crazy shit, but that hasn't happened. I've turned into a striver. I've achieved a lot of things that I'm incredibly proud of. I have my daughter, which is just immense, and she's the most joyous thing that I could have ever hoped for. I have creatures. I have a partner who is supportive and loving. I've got friends who are unbelievable, and a handful of family that kind of do their very best as well. And I'm okay, and I am determined to live a good, happy and long and prosperous life. So please do the same. And if your life is shit, then think of the ways in which you can make it not so shit. And if it still feels like it's utterly shit, then have a chat with somebody who loves you and who knows you, to remind you of the good things that are going on in your life as well, because I can assure you there will be some. It might just be that you're a little bit blinded to it because of how you're feeling, and that's perfectly okay. And it is okay, as we always say, not to be okay, but it is good to put a time scale on these things as well. So I might have a bad day and I might fight against it and then decide, no, fuck it, I'm just going to allow myself to have a bad day, but tomorrow's going to be different, and that's okay. So time scales are good. It just stops the big bad wolf kind of getting in and the black dog taking over, and destroying every piece of positivity that's kind of in there already. So it's about looking after yourself, looking after your own well-being and health, speaking out about troubles and problems, and remembering that there are people around like me who are dealing with the aftermath of suicide all day, every day, and it's a bit shit. So please don't add to that problem, and please stay alive because you are very much loved. Thank you for listening. Bye.